sunny afternoon at 5 p.m. But there's a gang that was after him, and that gang that was after him, they wear uniforms, they wear Portland Police Bureau badges, and that gang decided that he looked like he might be a gang member. They looked over at that young man and said, he doesn't belong in that car. They looked over at that young man and they said, I think that he's up to something. We are here today because Trayvon Martin may be the spark, but we have Aaron Campbell, Kendra James, Pete Notice, on and on and on. And at some point, as people of good conscience, a people that believe in equality, we have to say enough is enough. Last week we had 1,000 people out on the street. Today, I hope we have hundreds on the street. And as we prepare for the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, we plan to have 10,000 people on the streets of Portland. And let me tell you, we don't care what color you are. If you're black, if you're white, if you're Latino, if you stand for justice, you stand with us. But we also want to say that it doesn't matter what kind of uniform or what your position of power is. If you allow injustice to continue, we will be in your face. We will be demanding justice.
I am tired of talking about this, but I'm even more tired of having to remind myself that we live in a nation where we can experience what we experienced with the verdict. The Urban League of Portland and the Urban League nationally is committed to making sure that the Department of Justice and other civil and legal authorities further investigate this travesty. It cannot be unchanged or unchallenged. But the failing that we saw was more than a failing of a jury verdict. It was a failing of the rule of law. If we are a nation of people and a nation of laws, that verdict should never have occurred. If we are a nation of people and of laws, it should not make a difference who constitutes a jury in order to have a jury of your peers. We are in a state with a 3% population of African Americans. We're in a city with a 8% population. If the only way for us to receive justice is to be served by that small percentage of Portland or county residents, we're in trouble.
All races.
Justice needs to be served regardless of who sits in a jury box.
All right.
We are a nation of laws and we are a nation of people. The failing in Sanford, Florida was a failing potentially of people, but absolutely of laws. I wanted to read to you the charge that was given to any jury in a homicide case in the state of Florida before the Stand Your Ground law was passed. And trust me, just listen to this. The instructions before that legislation read as follows. The defendant cannot justify the use of force likely to cause death or great bodily harm unless he used every reasonable means within his power and consistent with his own safety to avoid the danger before resorting to that force. That was the law before Stand Your Ground. Now let me give you the charge that was given to that jury when they went away to come with their verdict. In deciding whether the defendant was justified in the use of deadly force, you must judge him by the circumstances in which he was surrounded at the time the force was used. The danger facing him need not have been actual. However, to justify the use of deadly force, the appearance of danger must have been so real that a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed the danger could have been avoided. Cautious and reasonable people do not disregard the charge of the police to remain in your car. Cautious and reasonable people do not approach an unarmed young man with a gun to ask why he is in that area. Cautious and reasonable people do not determine that he constituted a threat based on what he looked like, not what he was doing. So I feel for Trayvon's family and friends. But you know, in an odd sense, I also feel for that jury because they live in a state where laws were passed that could not allow for the equitable and judicious application of the rule of law. And that is the charge to us today. One, we want this verdict reversed, but two, we have to be vigilant in the laws and the policies that we allow to be passed because they will govern whether common sense and decency will be a part of how we live in this nation. And I don't care who sits in that jury box. I just want them to be just people.
Lay down, Michael.
So I thank you. I thank you for being here today, and I call upon you to make Portland and Oregon an example of how people of conscience, in addition to people of color, can create a just society that applies the rule of law equally to all of its residents. Thank you.
In Oregon, when I asked about the Stand Your Ground law, the legislature was a little confused. When you look at the national maps, they tell us that Oregon has a Stand Your Ground law. When I talked to the Legislative Council, they said, well, it's a little confusing. I see State Rep Lou Frederick in the audience. Hello, sir. Thank you for the work that you do. And I want to say that through Lou's leadership, there was at least hearings in Salem. I don't want to even give you the suggestion that anything moved, but there were at least hearings around issues of changing the use of force standard that police use when they say they were in fear of their life. We believe that the legislature should change that so that it would be, what would a reasonable person do under those circumstances? So back to the Stand Your Ground, we need to make sure that there is no ambiguity in Oregon's law. We do not want some kid to be killed in Oregon and then we start having a debate about whether or not the person had the requirement to disengage, right? So let's be proactive and make sure that the next legislative session is absolutely clear that the law says that your right is to disengage if you can safely do so. Not that you take the law into your hands and become judge, jury, and executioner. That's what we need here in Oregon.
This rally and march are being organized by the Portland campaign to end the new Jim Crow. And there are folks circulating clipboards. If you want to be contacted, you want to be involved in the organizing.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! Justice!
time that we have come together and said, the public leaders who say they speak for us do not, in fact, speak for us. There are some leaders in our community, come rain, come shine, whether the press shows up or not, are consistently at the table trying to ensure the civil rights of everyone in our community are respected. The gentleman I'm about to bring up on the stage has no equal in this community when it comes to standing for justice. He has no equal when it comes to taking it to the powers to tell them that enough is enough. The gentleman I'm talking about is the Dr. Reverend Leroy Haynes. He is the co-chair and co-founder of the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. He currently serves as the president of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, and I am honored to say that with all that, he is a dear, dear friend to me. Reverend Dr. Leroy Haynes.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! President Obama say, I am Trayvon Martin. In the year of 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the case of Dred Scott versus Sanford that blacks were so inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. In the year 2013, the verdict in the Trayvon Martin case still question the value of black humanity, still question the value and meaning of full citizenship, still question the rights of black people as a part of America and as citizens of America. Did Trayvon Martin have a right to freely go home from the store without being racially profiled? Did he have that right? Yes. Did Trayvon Martin have the right to have his killer arrested and processed through the criminal justice system? Yes. Did he have that right? Yes. Did Trayvon Martin have a right to defend himself from aggressors? Did he have a right to say that I will defend myself? Yes. Did Trayvon Martin have a right to be about his business of going home with tea and skittle? Did he have that right? Yes. I ask you today, is black blood equal in the values of white blood in the American judicial system? No. I will submit to you today, my brothers and my sisters, that the remnants of Dred Scott still pervades in the American justice system and in society. That the humanity and the equality of black people are still questioned by many when it comes to justice and equality for black Americans. That's why I come today to say that in this situation, in this case, we have to decide today whether we are going to be a moment here, or whether we are going to create a movement. You see, a moment is just for a period of time, but a movement is a process.
process that will move us to righteousness, a process that will remake America and bring the true dream of Martin Luther King into actualization. The dream is unfinished. The American dream has left us out, has left women out, has left in the history of 1776 property owners out. But now we're coming back to say that this dream shall be fulfilled. For it is ordained by God. It is written in the blood of those who have fought and those who have died and those who have been jailed and those that have given their life for freedom, justice, and equality. We shall overcome.
We have a lot of faith-based leaders in the audience here today, and we want to thank you for coming out and being present. I see a lot of grassroots leaders that are also in the community, and I want to thank you. I also want to thank the people that wore a hoodie today. As hot as it is, we wore a hoodie because we wanted to stand and make sure that people understood that a hoodie should not equal death. You know, we thought we were done. We thought that we had achieved the American dream. We thought that equality was ours. Boy, were we in for a rude awakening as we watched the Voting Rights Act disappear, being disintegrated by the U.S. Supreme Court. As we watch what is happening around this country. But I have faith in the next generation. I have a lot of faith in the next generation. The next generation is standing up to be counted right now. And I want to take a moment to introduce a young person, Amina, who is going to speak to you for a little while.
Okay, well, as she said, my name is Amina, and I'm just here to say that when I first heard about this, I was very devastated, and that I wanted to do something about it. And I got a news from friends telling you that this things was happening, and I was so excited to come and actually be a part of it. And I want to be a part of it until we make a change and defend to do some justice in his death. I hope other people around my age could come and also support too, because we do need young people to show the other people that we can stand for what's right and what's not wrong. I mean, what's right and what's not. Yeah. You all got it, right? Yeah. Okay. And I'm also very happy that I am working with these people that started this at the first place, and I'll be next to them throughout the end. And I'll be going to the meetings every day, and I hope you guys show too. That's all I have to say.
All right, got a lot of faith in our future.
Test. Whoa, hey, that's cool. We have a sound system, yay! The next person I'm going to bring up is Fred Bryant. Fred Bryant is the father of Keaton Otis. Fred Bryant, since his son was killed by Portland police in May of 2010, has monthly had a vigil at the site where his son was shot and killed. So for those of you who may have been living like in a foreign country and didn't hear the story about Keaton Otis, let me give you the short version before I bring his dad up. He's riding down in the street in his mother's car in Northeast Portland. He's on Halsey and right off Broadway. Two police officers who were part of the gang enforcement unit looked over at him and decided that he looked like he might be a gang member. Then they said that he looked at them aggressively as if to say, do they know what I know? I have a report here in my hand from the Certified Smart People, the CIO group, the CIR, the OIR group, which is paid by our taxpayer money to review in-custody police shootings. And the most devastating thing about this report is that they say that Keaton Otis' death was not based on his race. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, because if you look at page 84 of this report, it tells you what the officers were going through their minds when they stopped Keaton Otis in the first place. And so you see if you agree with me that this may have had something to do with race. A look from Mr. Otis seemed to say, do they know what I know? And suggested to the officer that Mr. Otis may have just committed a crime. Defrain reported that his partner said, if you saw the look this guy just gave me, you'd run too. Mr. Otis was wearing a hooded sweatshirt with the hood up on what was described as an uncharacteristically hot day. Mr. Otis did not seem to fit the car, in that it seemed like one an older woman, not a younger man, would drive. Mr. Otis looks like he could be a gangster. Now I am asking you, the public, you be the jury. Those questions, do you believe if Keaton Otis had been a white 22-year-old man riding down the street on Halsey, that was the questions that the police would have had going through their mind? No. Do you think that if that was an old person, maybe, that the police would have had those questions going through their mind? No. What is it that made those two gang enforcement officers look at a young 22-year-old man and say, he looks like he could be a gangster? I rest my case. I'm going to bring Fred Bryan up, and I'm going to ask you to give him some time. I can't imagine. I would never say that I know what he's going through. I can't imagine what it's like to bury a son who lost their life at the hands of the police. But I can tell you, I know how hard it is to publicly talk about this experience. So would you guys surround Fred Bryan with love as he comes up and shares with you?
Surrounding us is the so-called justice system, all around us. And you know, being in this city for 53 years, I've never had a problem. But all of a sudden, our children are having the problem. You know, they are taking our children from us. Okay? And for 3 years, I have been on the doorsteps of all these little buildings, and I would talk to these people. And they really think that we're crazy, that, you know, we don't know what's going on, we don't know what we see, we don't know what we hear, and we're looking right at it. But yet again, them and their little partners will gang up and say, oh no, you're not seeing the right thing. My son was driving up Grand Avenue, minding his own business. And mind you that this incident took place the day after they fired another chief. So these guys were already pissed off. And these are the stories that were going on in the newspapers, Oregon Live. I mean, there was a whole bunch of stuff written about it. And it was almost like, oh, poor them. You know, we were just doing our job. Well, if you're doing your job, you're supposed to serve and protect. Exactly. And do community, learn. When I was growing up, The police officers knew my name.
That's right.
They knew everybody's name pretty much over in the Northeast because they were part of the community. They weren't running around being bullies and wearing their dark shades and driving up and down the street and looking at you like you done something. It wasn't like that, you know?
It's all good.
All right.
Love you. All right.
You know, God blessed me with 5 children. They're all adults, and they're good adults. And I always told my kids, be aware of your surroundings. Be aware, just be a good citizen. Just do right, go to school, get a job. You know, pay your taxes. And Keaton didn't get a chance to do that. They took it from him. They took everything from him. You know, this report Joanne was talking about, we were at a meeting the other day here, and one of the council members, I think he's a civil rights attorney or something, and they kept pointing out page 84. And he said, you know, if any of us looked at this and read this, the first thing that come out your mouth was profiling. That's what they did. But yet again, they sit there, the other people sit there at the table, and the chief of them just look like with some corny words that meant nothing. They avoided. In my possession, and I've had it in my possession for 3 years, exactly what they did, how they did it, who was talking, and who was saying what. They took first-hand witnesses that were right there talking to my son. When he yelled out, "Ma'am, don't leave me, they're gonna kill me." This is what she said. And when that woman went to grand jury, they said, you know, ma'am, we checked your record. And you did some stuff way back in the day. So if you lied then, you're lying now. The woman that took the video of the whole incident, her and her boyfriend took the video. They harassed her so hard for that video. So hard. And that video will never leave my mind. Never. Because I hear my son yelling. I hear my son. I hear him say, "I have my hands up." And I hear the officer say, "Let's do it." And I hear a barrage of bullets going into my child's body. And you're going to tell me that he shot you. How do you shoot somebody when they got their hands up? Oh, it goes even further than that. I had to go see my son. And when I saw him, I knew what they did. I knew he was telling the truth. And they were lying. You know, I'm not scared of none of them. And they know it. I am an angry black man. Okay? I'm an angry black man. But you know what? I'm going to do it the right way. As Doctor says, it is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And I ain't going nowhere.
He's a proud, angry black man, and he's got every right to be angry. I'm angry too. We should all be angry with the loss of potential because of senseless death because the people who are sworn to protect and serve fail at their duty. At this time, I'd like to bring up to the podium Leila Hofston, and she is the organizer for the Portland Black Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays, also known as PFLAG. Please put your hands together.
First, I really want to thank everyone who showed up here today, because on our way over here, I was afraid that there were more people in line for voodoo donuts than would be at this rally. Thank you for showing up. Firstly, in the melee of the past couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time analyzing my anger and trying to find out what's really at the base of it. And discerning between the hyperbole has been the hardest part of that. But beyond the chatter of social media and politics, the element that stings the most is the shattering of my illusion of safety. Because as a marginalized person, I've been fed a lot of truisms about what is safe. Step and fetch, play basketball, make music, make art, do the things that are safe and that are normalize you. Blend and homogenize, and you will be safe. Buy Nike, buy Apple, blend, homogenize. Don't wear that short skirt. Don't walk late at night. Don't be uppity and the police won't bother you. Don't demand a raise and you can keep your job. Be complacent and do everything you can to emulate white heteronormativity, and you will be tolerated. You'll be allowed to participate in mainstream society, and you will be safe. And we believed it, if only because we want to so badly. Even though we watch the contrary happen on a daily basis, a black Harvard professor can't get accidentally locked out of his own home without police scrutiny. And a black president can't even bring up the topic of race and the shadows of Birmingham, Alabama without being accused of race baiting. And let's be honest, even in our little Portland bubble, we don't really care about our black children unless we can use them to unless we can use them as poster children for fluoride. And right now, I feel more than anything that we can't wait any longer. We shouldn't have waited until this young man lost his life and his killer walked away free. You shouldn't have to wait the next time someone follows you in the store, someone scrutinizes your clothing, someone questions your abilities or your ethnicity, and someone decides not to validate who you are by questioning you. We cannot wait any longer, and we have to be responsible for interrupting each other's oppression, for taking responsibility for each other's safety and for each other's well-being. We cannot wait any longer, and we must step forward together. To bring a man up on the stage now who has been for well over 20 years tracking and recording police misconduct. If you want to find out exactly the history of police oppression in the city of Portland, all you really need to do is go to one website, portlandcopwatch.org. And if you go there, you will find out that we have paid tens of millions of dollars in settlements over the last decade for police misconduct, yet police have done nothing wrong. What you will find is even after 15 months of a Department of Justice investigation that prove that Portland police officers use excessive force against people with mental illness and people perceived to have mental illness, Portland Police Bureau still says their officers don't do anything wrong. It's the broken mental health system. Yeah.
clearly, our system is irrevocably broken. And it is our job to fix it. Please put your hands together and welcome Dan Handelman up to the podium.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Dan Handelman. I'm with Portland Cop Watch. Our parent group is called Peace and Justice Works. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and our parent group is called Peace and Justice Works. So I'm going to break things up for you and then break it down again, okay? So Trayvon Martin was not shot by a police officer. So why is Portland Cop Watch talking about this, right? On a global scale, what we got is we have airplanes and drones dropping bombs on people with dark skin and killing them overseas. And that's being done by our country. And then that violence brings itself back home in the form of police violence on the streets. And then that violence gets down to the level of the neighborhood watchman who thinks that he's a police officer, right? So we have a culture of violence that we've got to stop. This has been going on, these shootings by police in Portland of people of color, black people particularly, have been going on for more than 30 years, longer than I've been here and studying this. But we know of the case of Keaton Otis. You've heard it a couple of times. I'm going to break it down for you again. The experts that were hired in by our police review board to look at whether Keaton Otis was shot wrongfully saying that he had looked at them funny, that he was wearing a hoodie and on a hot day, that he was in the wrong car, that he was slouching, and that he looked like a gangster, was not racial profiling, because then after the police chose to follow him for those reasons, he committed traffic infractions. He changed lanes without signaling. He went across 2 lanes of traffic abruptly. Do you think a white person would have been killed at the end of a traffic stop for those incidents? No. And do you think that maybe Keaton Otis, in his mind, 3.5 months after Aaron Campbell was shot in the back, might have given them a look because he was scared to death he'd end up dead? And unfortunately, he was right? Unfortunately, he was right. So there's a couple other cases that have come forward, but fortunately the people lived through these experiences. They filed complaints with our Independent Police Review Division, our oversight body. One of them is a woman, an African-American woman, 4'10", and she was mistaken for a Latino man who's 5'4", who was going through some mailboxes in the neighborhood. And she complained that her knapsack was rummaged through without cause, and that the police were rude, and that she was racially profiled. And guess what? Our police review board refused to investigate whether or not she was racially profiled. It took a vote of the review board to force them to go back and investigate that. Now there's a second case, a Mr. Floyd McCorvey, and his case is coming up at the beginning of next month. He was walking along the street by Fred Meyer's in Northwest, and they said, "Are you a pimp?" They said, "Are you a pimp? Is that woman with you? Is she one of your girls?" And they patted him down. They found a marijuana pipe, and they said, "Is this a crack pipe?" And then they said, "Hey, you live in public housing. We're paying for your housing." And the review board, when they're looking at that, they said, "We don't see an allegation of racial profiling." Oh. Does that sound racial profiling to you? Yeah. Okay, well, I think so too. So Mr. McCorvey filed a complaint. The review board asked the city to investigate, and the city said, "No, we're not going to do it. Because at best, we'll come out with a he said, she said answer." Yeah, so our Citizen Review Committee, the 9-member board that allegedly represents us, but they stood up for his rights. They demanded that the city do the investigation, and the city again said no. So, on August 7th, Wednesday, August 7th at 5:30 at the Portland building right over there, they're going to hold a hearing for Mr. McCorvey's case, and they're going to listen to everything about the case, and they have the ability to send it back one more time and ask for investigation. And are you going to be there to support Mr. McCorvey? Yeah. Thank you, because we have a broken system. We have a system that doesn't face up to the facts, and even though President Obama is guilty of dropping those bombs from those drones, he also made a very good speech yesterday about racial profiling. And everybody's got to understand, and everybody's got to change the way we do things in this country.
All right, Dan. You have been so gracious and so patient. We only have 2 more speakers before we start moving our bodies around and marching around. But are you still with me? Yeah. All right. like to see. So next I'm going to bring up Kate Lohr, who you heard from a little while earlier, but she's the social justice minister for First Unitarian Church.
Especially white Americans like me proclaim that we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What we say?
Where all persons, regardless of race or ethnicity or class, can expect equal treatment by our police and court system. But it's simply not true, is it?
No.
It wasn't true in 1892 when the Pledge of Allegiance was written, and it's not true now. What happened to Trayvon Martin happens day in and day out all over this country. But it was Trayvon who brought us together today, not only here in Portland, but all across the nation. This one is different.
That's right.
We want to know why.
That's right.
Maybe it's because the Stand Your Ground law clearly let Zimmerman get away with murder. Maybe it's because we can relate to Trayvon's parents, that what happened to Trayvon could happen to any of our kids.
Right.
Well, maybe not any of our kids. Maybe not my kids. Why? Because my kids are white. Trayvon's death has sparked this National Day of Protest because it showed irrefutable proof that justice does not exist in the justice system. There's one list of rules for people who are white or light-skinned. There's a whole different set of rules for people who are dark-skinned. And if you question what I just said, I challenge you. I challenge you to read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. It will change your life. Now, one of the hardest things for me as a white person to deal with during these days and weeks of this trial is to witness people I love who are so clueless, who are in denial. So I want to share with all the white people here what I share with my white friends when I want to interrupt their language that's oppressive, that's racist. And it's this. Imagine yourself on the beach. You're walking down the beach, having a wonderful time, and you think maybe it's time to turn around and go back. But when you turn your back and face the wind, you realize that your walk all this time has been buffeted, has been pushed forward by a tailwind. But when you turn around and you face the wind, you get to see just how strong it is. Well, that's white privilege in this country. We have the wind at our backs. We don't know it's there, but it makes all the difference. So again, let us join together next month too. Next month, let's make it big.
There was a national call to action for people to hold a rally all across the country to make sure that we demand that the federal government do a federal suit on Zimmerman. Yes. What we need I'm a kid from the 60s. When I was a kid, when the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division came to town, they meant business. They were going to make sure that they were protecting the civil rights of the individuals they were in town for. I wish I could tell you I have as much confidence in today's Department of Justice Civil Rights Division as my parents had in theirs, but I don't. Because what I've seen so far is that they protect the status quo. Why do we end up with mass incarceration? Because the federal government provides incentives to police departments to militarize, to go and target people for drugs and guns and other activities, In fact, we have a federal government that creates their own terrorists so that they can go off and try and convict them and put them in jail. So just because I stand with you today and say, yes, we have to demand that the federal government takes action, I live under no illusion that they will take that action without severe pressure from community members all across this great nation. And we can make it happen. And last but certainly not least is my fabulous friend Nicole Bauer, who is also one of my partners in creating the campaign to end the new Jim Crow. Please put your hands together for Nicole.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming out today on a beautiful day when you could be doing 100 of different other things because it's summer and we finally earned the sunshine, but we're here instead. Thank you so much. I was asked to speak today, and I'm honored to be able to take the stage after Pastor Haynes and after Reverend Lohr. And anytime I can stand next to Joanne Hardesty, I'm honored to stand next to Joanne Hardesty, because by random luck, I happen to be on a civil rights history tour with high school students through Selma and Birmingham and Montgomery during the last week of the trial and the deliberations. And I'm pulling out from my journals conversations and questions that I had with these high school students who were from all over the country. Because we couldn't help but wonder if the thousands of people whose lives were taken in Birmingham as we're walking through the park where Bull Connor turned fire hoses and when he turned dogs on children, we couldn't help but wonder that the system that those people were fighting to be an equal part of, would they ever have guessed that in 60 years that very system would be putting a murdered child on trial while it lets a murderer go free? And we couldn't help but wonder if those people whose lives were taken in the 50s and in the 60s, if they would have ever believed that phrases like war on drugs and phrases like gang member would be used on a daily basis by the media and by politicians to justify racist policies and racist murders. There were youth on this trip who identified as either black, African American, multiracial. We let them choose it. And they were the ones who said, had a police officer shot Trayvon Martin under the guise of being an alleged gang member, would any politician have ever spoken his name? That's an honest question, and clearly we all know the answer to that, but it's a very interesting question as you're walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge talking about this with a young person. And on this civil rights tour, we played a lot of card games. And anybody who plays a lot of card games knows the importance of trump cards when it comes to card games. And in trump cards, that's the card that beats all cards just because you say it does. And just like Reverend Haynes spoke to, in this country, white trumps black in everything. Everything. And this was not lost on these kids. It wasn't lost on these kids as we were walking through Selma. It wasn't lost on these kids as we're walking through Birmingham. White still trumps everything. But then at a very fascinating exhibit in Georgia, we came across an interesting quote that I'd actually never heard from Martin Luther King Jr. And in this quote, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Many white Americans of goodwill will never connect bigotry with economic exploitation. They have deplored prejudice, but tolerated or ignored economic injustice." profit trumps when it comes to profit-driven banks that foreclose on homes, because profit is more important than housing, apparently. And in this system, profit trumps when it comes to health insurance mandates that actually are supposed to take the place of a national health care program. Even they don't. They just mean profit for health insurance companies. And in this system, we just had thousands of people marching when it comes to Monsanto. That is a profit issue. It is a profit issue when corporations like Monsanto and Exxon can override scientific data that says we are destroying this planet, but profit still trumps. And so I just want to close by saying that profit trumps with these stand your ground laws as well, because of the American Legislative Exchange Council. Let us not forget how these laws are being passed from state to state to state, that profit is behind them with ALEC. And in the end, I'm going to leave it to the kids, and I'm going to thank all of the kids. I'm going to thank everybody here who is under the age of 18. I'm looking over there because that's where I see a pod. Young people must be a part of this movement. Young people must be a part of this movement on a local level. And all of us can draw inspiration from their creativity, from their wisdom, from their good wit, from their assertiveness, from their humility, from everything that they have to offer, just like they did in Birmingham, just like they did in Selma. They can offer that to us today. Thank you so much for being out here.
All right, are you ready to march? Yeah!